Hello and welcome to The Difference Makers, where we share stories, tips, and strategies from leaders who are making a difference in our world. I'm Lynn Sanders, your host, and we're here to help you step into your highest potential. Today's topic is reclaim your voice. Speak without losing yourself. It's something many of us deal with. Have you ever struggled to fully express yourself when speaking in front of others? To help us understand how to reconnect with our inner selves to make the impact we all desire, I'm excited to introduce you to our guest today, Jade Nanton, who's coming to us all the way from London. Jade is a multi-talented expert, a public speaking coach, and a professional actor with over 30 years of experience helping leaders develop presence, confidence, and authentic communication. Her work also goes beyond traditional speaking skills, addressing the nervous system patterns that affect us as we show up, so we can communicate in a way that's grounded, present, and powerful. So now, to give us the inside story about the power of speaking well, I'm excited to introduce Jade Nanton.
Hi, Lynn. Great to be here.
I love what you're doing. And even the title to me was very intriguing, Reclaim Your Voice. Speak without losing yourself. Could you just take a moment and explain what does that mean?
Well, what it means is that most people think that they've got a speaking problem, and actually they don't have a speaking problem. They have a disconnection problem. It's really a relationship thing. And, when we disconnect from ourselves and then all eyes turn to us, our brain sees that as a threat instead of seeing it as an invitation to connect. So we just lose our voice. And that's why people get things like, they go blank in the brain, or they suddenly can't find their words, or their voice goes tight, or their body goes tight. Everybody has different symptoms, but that's what's actually going on. So people lose their voice.
That is true. I'm excited to hear your insights today. First, I just wanted to ask you, how did you get started in your path of helping others with their speaking?
Well, I am by profession an actor. I've been a professional actor for 40 years. And basically what happened was I've been acting for 15 years. So I was great on stage and I had no problem with the camera. And so I discovered quite by accident that I was an awful public speaker, because I was asked in church to give a notice. So I gave a notice, went to the front, gave my notice, came back, sat down, job done. So I thought. My husband leaned in and he said to me, "What was that?" I said, "What was what?" He said, "You were like a 10-year-old girl." He said, "You were twisting around." He said, "And you were speaking in this really high-pitched voice." He said, "I didn't even recognize you." And you know what? I was a bit annoyed with him at the time, but when I thought about it, he was right. I didn't recognize myself. And I realized in that moment that I could speak on stage as someone else, but I couldn't show up as me. I was really afraid to be seen. And for me, when I went digging around, what it was for me is that I'm a very powerful character. And I didn't want to tread on anybody's toes. So I was actually shrinking myself and trying to look like I wasn't a threat, or, I didn't want people to think I was a big head. So I was sort of playing this weird role. And as soon as I realized that, I thought, no, that's stopping. I need to sort this out. So then I started to go to public speaking classes, and they just tried to teach me performance, which I already knew. I didn't need that. And so I worked it out for myself that actually it was about my identity. It was that I didn't really feel safe with myself. And so then I went on my journey, and it's quite a long journey because I'm now CBT trained and I do something called relational life therapy and various things. I looked at nervous system regulation, sorted all of that out. And what happened was, very naturally, when I reconnected with myself, my voice came back on its own. And then, you couldn't get me off. You couldn't get me off the stage.
Wow.
Shut up.
I think most people just naturally assume if you're an actor that automatically feel comfortable speaking. So I think that's very important to differentiate between being a character and being fully yourself. So I'm curious,
Exactly.
if you could tell us more about why do you think very intelligent, capable professionals lose their clarity when the attention turns towards them? So we're getting now into the deeper parts of why do they lose their clarity when they're up there speaking publicly?
Well, well, what happens is what I just said with me is that people have disconnected from themselves very early on for very different reasons. But mostly, if I put it really succinctly, when we're children, and we have experiences that are of a heightened emotional nature, we don't yet have the tools to deal with those moments. And if we don't have very skilled caretakers that can help us to really process what's going on, what we do is we just bury those moments. And to bury those moments is painful. So what we do is we push those bits of ourselves away and we hide. Now, the problem is when we grow up, those parts of us don't grow up. They stay as these little kids that have got these unprocessed emotions. And then we stand on a stage or in a boardroom and all eyes are on us. And we get frightened that people are going to see the parts of us we don't want them to see. And so what we do is we start monitoring instead of just speaking, just doing our job, which is to give the message. What we do is we give the message and then we run around the other side to where the message is being received.
Yes.
And we try to control how it's being received. And we can't do that. And of course, you've split your attention. Your brain is trying to do these two jobs and it's assessing and it's trying to sort of make little adjustments. So there's no way you can think clearly under those circumstances.
True. I love that description. You're split into two selves. That's right. We're speaking and then we're also watching ourselves. So what happens to the mind and body? Because I love your psychology, inner self background. What happens inside our mind and body when we're experiencing anxiety like that?
Well, what's happening is that your nervous system is seeing the attention as a threat instead of what it is, which is an invitation to connection. When eyes are looking at you, you actually need that as a human being. It's part of, human development. Children that are not looked at give up the will to live. I mean, it's very serious. So when people are looking at us, we want to be looked at, but because we've been hiding parts of ourselves, we just don't feel safe with them gazing at us. So what happens is the nervous system goes into fight flight. And that is why the body misbehaves. So, different people get different things. Some people shake, some people get dry throat, some people they just don't know what they're thinking anymore. And so that's what's happening. It's a nervous system response, really. And it derails everything.
That's really true. I remember I used to even just get nervous speaking, on a stage until I focused on just what I wanted to say instead of thinking about how I looked. And I'd like you to go further into the part where you took you took some speaking classes and noticed that they were just teaching you how to present what you already knew how to do. So why do you think traditional presentation skills courses often fail to solve that deeper problem that you just described of looking at ourselves?
Well, the reason it doesn't work is because if you give people techniques while they're disconnected from themselves, those techniques just become another mask that the person is wearing. And the problem with masks is they slip. And we then have to spend quite a lot of time and energy keeping them in place. So if those masks are actually the techniques, instead of actually making what you're saying land better, they end up getting in the way. And so what often happens is people will learn all these techniques. They think they've dealt with their anxiety, and for a little while it might get a bit better. But what happens very soon is that the anxiety creeps in again, and then they've already got the techniques. So then they feel really hopeless because they're like, well, I've done all the classes. I must just be terrible at this. Maybe I need to just give it up. I'm just someone who can't speak. And that's what people end up doing. They end up thinking, well, I'm just not good at speaking. So techniques are great, but only if you've laid the foundation of being connected with yourself first. Then the techniques are actually tools that help you to really communicate at a very high level. So there is a place for technique, but people teach it too early.
Wow, wow, this is really fascinating. So tell us more about how do people get to reconnect with oneself so that our voice is clear and confident? What are some of the tips you can give us?
Okay, so, well, first of all, tips is my pet peeve. I don't give
Oh,
tips
okay. All right.
because
So
usually,
go ahead.
usually you'll give tips and tricks, you know. So for me, that's like if you came to me with a headache and you said, "Oh, my head hurts," and I said, "Oh, take a pill." Okay,
Ah,
the
okay,
pill,
good point.
but
So
your headache was data.
yes,
Yeah, your
yes.
headache was telling you got a problem. So with your nerves, when you get frightened and your body starts to misbehave, it's data. And what that data is that there's unprocessed experiences living within you. So what I help people do is to go back, unearth the troublesome ones, because you're not going to go back and relive all these moments when you're a child, but there will be certain moments that gave you very strong messages about you and your voice and how unimportant it is and how bad you are at expressing yourself, or there's parts of you that are just not acceptable. So what we do is we go back and we look at your unprocessed stories, really, because your wounds live in your stories,
Mm.
and your healing lives in the telling of those stories and having those stories witnessed by other people. So in my work, I work with groups.
Hmm.
So this group becomes a very safe place where you get to share these stories, but remember the stories happen to a very young part of yourself. So you might be getting upset about something that now as an adult you think is quite silly. Like maybe one of my clients, he scored an own goal when he was 9 years old. And his teammates were really unhappy with him. And his dad got really angry and his dad shouted at him and basically told him he was useless. And of course, that message went in. And he was not given the opportunity at that time to express how he felt about that moment. So in the classroom, or when you're working with me and you're in your group, I call it the classroom, you tell that story, but you tell it as a 9-year-old so that you're allowed to express the emotions that went with that. So if you want to cry because you got an own goal, you're allowed to. And usually what happens is the rest of the group cry with you.
Wow.
And once that story is told, it just disappears. That lie is gone. So the transformation is often quite sudden and quite surprising. So yeah, that's the work I do.
That is amazing. And that's so unique, Jade, because what you're saying, I love what I was wanting to write down. Your wounds exist in your stories. I think you
Your
said,
word, your story.
and
Yeah.
in your healing, can you repeat that? How do you bring people back?
And
Go ahead.
yeah, your healing happens in the telling of those stories and having them witnessed.
I love that is beautiful. Your healing is in the telling. So if people can connect with you and you can bring out the wound and then they can tell the story, they're ultimately becoming free of that. It's healing of the wound and learning to speak more
Yeah.
authentically and clearly, which I don't know too many people who really dive in deeply like that. As you said, we're not just doing presentation skills here. We're getting to your inner self. I love that. So, what ultimately happens when people change and they're reconnected with themselves? You told me privately some of the stories. Maybe you could share another one of people who are in a high position who reconnected and all of a sudden they spoke differently. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. You know, you said what changes? Everything changes. It feels like magic. It's so sudden, and it's not a very big thing. I mean, the stories people tell, they don't have to be these terrible tragedies, because people don't understand trauma. Trauma is just the definition of trauma is an enforced disconnect. Okay, so it's a disconnect that you don't want. So it could be you get separated from a pet that you love, or from a person, or from even from a place. So some children, the wounds they're carrying is that they had to change school at a moment when, maybe they had lots of friends and they felt very safe and secure. And then suddenly they had to, everything had to be uprooted and had to go and live in a different part of the country. That is a trauma. That's a wound.
Mm-hmm.
And if they wanted to throw their weight around and shout about it and cry about it, and mum and dad were like, oh, stop being silly. You're going to have a bigger bedroom when you get there. It's going to be fine, Then what you do is you silence yourself. They silence you. You silence yourself. Your voice gets lost. That wound lives within you for years and years.
Wow.
Then, as an adult, that wound is still there. And when attention turns to you, that wound starts going, oh, is somebody going to listen? Oh, is somebody going to listen? And your brain goes, no, not now. It's not for you now. No. And this fight goes on. So really, it's allowing the child self to have a voice, because we often don't listen to children. We often tell them they're being silly. And so they believe us for them, and then they grow up, and then we, as adults, we tell our child self that we're being silly.
Right.
So we silence ourselves again.
Right.
And that's not good.
Right.
I hope I've answered your
question. What?
I went off on a tangent.
No, that was interesting, because we all have our child self in us. And that's what you're saying, that we need to acknowledge that child self. You had told me earlier about an executive who spoke more clearly after working with you, that at one point he just wasn't able to have good presentation skills. Do you remember what you had said to me?
Yeah, that happens all the time. But I'll actually share a different one with you, because there was a woman in her 40s, very high up, very, very respected, doing really well. But as she went for a really big promotion, all of a sudden, now she'd been very capable, all of a sudden, she could not really communicate properly in the boardroom. And she did not know what it was about. And when she came to work with me, one of the things we uncovered was that when she was a little girl, she had a dolly, and she'd drawn on it with biro. And so this dolly had lots of pen on it. But she loved this dolly. She adored this dolly. She came home from school one day, she was about 6, and her mum had thrown the dolly out, but bought her a new one. So she had this lovely new dolly, and the little girl goes nuts. She starts crying, and her mum gets really angry, and she says to her, you stop it. You're really ungrateful. You're a very ungrateful little girl. You've got this brand new dolly, and you're making a terrible fuss. Anyway, that little girl just buried that, and now she's in her 40s. And when she told that story, she sobbed.
Wow.
Because she loved that dolly, and it was gone, and it was a deep wound inside her. Soon as she'd had her moment, there's lots of crying in my classes. There's lots of tissues though. And as soon as she'd had that moment, that was it. She was fine. She went back to work, never had that problem again. And so that's how it is. It's so crazy. But you think about it, that little girl's voice was taken.
Yes.
And suddenly it was given back. So the voice comes back very, very
I see. So that is reclaiming your voice. That's what our topic's all about, getting back in touch with your inner self. I love that. So if we were to sum up all these gems of wisdom that you've given us, what would you like our listeners to remember? What's one thing you want people to remember?
Well, I haven't actually said it yet today, but I want to, because my work, what's at the absolute heart of my work, is that I believe every human is a unique being who was made by love, for love, to love. And they carry a spark that no one else has got. And it's a spark the world needs. So if they lose their voice, if their voice isn't part of our world, we all miss out. That can't be replaced by anyone else. So what I want people to remember is that their voice really matters. And if they don't find it again, they're not really going to deliver their message. So I believe we arrive with a message. And if you don't find your voice, you're going to leave with that message still inside you. And I think that's a really great waste. And so that's what motivates me. So I want people to remember that their voice matters.
Your voice matters. That's beautiful. Yes, everyone's voice matters. We need everyone. Jade, I want to thank you so much for being here and sharing your insights. And to everyone who's watching or listening, I recommend taking one step fully, as Jade just recommended, to let your voice come out, show up more fully, because your voice matters, your story matters, and your difference begins when you decide to share it. Thank you all for being here. You make a difference. To learn how to overcome your fear of public speaking and enjoy being seen, visit jadenanton.com. You'll also benefit from her free webinar.